Welcome back to another episode of Marketing Girly by Sky Society. Today I'm chatting with Rachel Kusin. She is the Senior Marketing Director at SkinnyDipped. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'm very excited to chat with you and go through your career journey. Rachel's got a lot of experience in the food industry. She's worked at Chameleon Cold-Brew, Nestlé, Last Crumb, and is now at SkinnyDipped. And also based in Austin, just
Yes.
like me, which we love. But before we jump into all of those good details, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am currently the Senior Marketing Director at SkinnyDipped. If you are not familiar with the SkinnyDipped brand, you are in for a treat. We make really delicious, better for you snacks, best known for our thinly dipped nuts, cups, and bites. And I lead all of our brand marketing efforts. So what I think is really cool about our SkinnyDipped team is that we are very small but mighty. So we really handle the entire consumer journey. And what I mean by that is every consumer touch point from retail, how you engage with the brand online or in person. My team is really leading and mostly in-house with some great agency partners that act as an extension of our brand.
Okay. Super interesting to hear. And as I mentioned to you before, I am also a fan of Skinny Dipped. And I feel like I've eaten the almonds since like high school or college. I feel like those are definitely an OG. And what's really interesting to me sometimes about industries like this, or especially food, sometimes we might buy a product off the shelf and we might not totally understand like the marketing and branding that went in behind it. Is there something about this industry that maybe like not a lot of people know, or something that was new to you kind of once you got into the food and CPG space?
So many things that were new to me. I guess like taking a step back, the process of how a product gets on shelf is so complicated. And I always think about, especially from a marketing standpoint, like my main stakeholder is the consumer, right? Everything that we do is through a consumer lens. But when we talk about CPG or consumer packaged goods, we also have the retailer and the buyer that quite literally decides which brands get on shelf as a stakeholder. And so it's important because I need to understand, obviously, our consumer, what they're looking for, but I also better understand what our buyers are looking for and what's important to them.
So you're not just marketing to me who's going to go buy Skinny Dipped when I go to Whole Foods, but you're marketing to the person at Whole Foods that's trying to decide what products to have on their shelves.
Exactly. Like, think about the last time you were in a grocery store. There's a very defined amount of space on a shelf, and there's quite literally a buyer that is deciding which brands get to be on shelf and which products get to be on shelf. And so ultimately, having the consumer demand matters. But I also need to be able to paint a stronger story for our buyer to say, this is why Skinny Dip should be on the shelf. This is why you need, a better for you dark chocolate peanut butter cup or a thinly dipped cocoa almond, which is, something that a lot of retailers never had seen before Skinny Dipped.
Okay, that is something that I didn't know. So I love that. And then the other thing that also really intrigues me, especially in the food and CPG space, is when I go to the grocery store, I love different packaging. I feel like I'm always getting my attention's being grabbed by a new brand just because their packaging's a bit different. And I think a lot of newer brands that have been launched have sometimes even had their entire like product differentiation is like almost solely on packaging. What has your experience looked? I know we're going to get into your like full career journey, but I imagine it's a lot different now than it was when you started.
Absolutely.
But is there anything there that you can share that either you've seen like change over the years, any trends or anything that you've learned?
Well, so I would say in terms of evolution, and this is probably no surprise, but if you're launching a brand today, you have to be digitally native. So 10 years ago, if you were going into a new retailer, you were thinking about your packaging on shelf, so important. How you show up in store, so important. But now we're also thinking about how do we show up online? So if you're searching on Target.com for a healthy snack, is Skinny Dip going to show up? We weren't thinking about that a decade ago, but how consumers shop has evolved, and that directly impacts marketing because at the end of the day, we have to show up where consumers shop. And consumers aren't just shopping in store, they're shopping online, they're shopping on Amazon. Maybe they're discovering your brand at a small local store in your town. Those are all things that we have to think about as a marketer because ultimately we need to be where our consumers are today and where they're going.
That's such a good point. I even think, well, now I'm back to buying my groceries in person, but there was a time when I was ordering my groceries online and I would find new products based off of, yeah, like what, Whole Foods would recommend to me or just like scrolling or even I think on like DoorDash when you're trying to order something and you're like scrolling through the products that you see that you're absolutely right. That digital impression matters just as much as the impression that I would have if I saw it in store.
It does. We call it an impulse buy too. If you're looking on Instacart or maybe DoorDash and maybe you see Skinny Dipped as you're searching and it's an impulse buy, right? You're like, wow, that sounds good. Maybe I want a healthy snack or a healthy sweet treat. And it's a great way to reach new consumers.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about how you got into this industry in the first place. I know I've mentioned some of the brands that you've kind of had a decent amount of time at, but can you tell me about what your start into this space looked like?
Yeah. So my start into the food and beverage world was very ironically in the fast food space. So for many years was known as the fried chicken girl. I got, I guess, my start in food and beverage in college, interning for Zaxby's, a fast casual chain, then interned for Church's Chicken. I really wanted to understand how these big global brands were built. And really, my goal was just to be a sponge. I wanted to learn as many things as possible. I wanted to be a fly on the wall. I wanted to sit in R&D calls, be part of larger marketing campaigns. I didn't care if I was literally just there to take notes. Like I wanted to absorb and learn. And then from there was a marketing coordinator at an organization called Shalotsky's, another fast casual chain that I actually joined because someone that I had worked with at Church's Chicken was over there. Just shows the importance of connections and relationships, no matter like what stage you're at. And then I quickly realized that I wanted to work at brands that aligned with my own personal values. And something that's been really important to me in my career is to think about the purpose behind the brand. Does it align with my own values? The people behind the brand, I think, is so important. I'm a big believer that a brand is built from the inside out and the people behind it matter. And then, of course, the position, right? The role itself. And so I kind of did a pivot and I left the fast food world and joined the natural food and beverage space at Chameleon Cold-Brew. And that has probably been one of the most important and pivotal roles in my career so far.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to realize when you're early in your career because I even think now with the work I do now, like it's so much easier to work harder when you're passionate about what you're doing. And it's so much easier to do better work when you believe in the product and you believe in the mission. And it's more than just trying to sell something and you genuinely feel like you're having a positive impact on the world. And I always say, like, you don't need to work at a nonprofit to feel like the work that you're doing is impactful. And so that's really interesting to hear that realization that you had of like, yeah, maybe the fast food, the fried chicken girl isn't the name I want to go by, throughout my career and I want to be more values aligned. I feel like the earlier you can realize that and also like take the leap and make the change. Obviously now seeing the rest of your career journey, you can see that it kind of paved a way for you in a new path, which is really inspiring to hear. Can you talk about that switch though? So you didn't have that specific experience. You had the food, so it was like definitely related, but was it scary for you to make that switch? Did you have to like sell yourself a bit differently when you were interviewing or applying to jobs?
It was frightening. I actually got connected with the founder of Chameleon Cold-Brew through someone that I'd worked with in the past. So again, like common thread here, like relationships matter. And at the time, the brand was at Whole Foods. They were doing a few $1 million in revenue, but not a massive brand. And they were looking for their first full-time marketing hire.
You were the first one?
I was their first full-time
No
marketing hire.
way.
And I look back at that and they absolutely took a chance on me. I was passionate about the brand. It felt like a sales cycle. Like I had multiple interviews over the course of multiple months to like really get to know each other, which is so important with an early stage brand. And I had actually had an offer from a national brand that I had accepted. And the founder of Chameleon called and said, like, I think we're ready to hire someone. And I said, well, I've already accepted a job. And the long of the short of it is I ended up joining Chameleon and it was the best decision I ever made.
That gave me chills. So I've actually had a friend in a similar situation where she was interviewing for a company, got it, but then another brand that she wanted more also gave her an offer, but she had already accepted, and I remember her being like, "Well, can I even deny?" What were you feeling? Like, is it okay? Obviously, you did it, so I'm sure things worked out, but I know that can be a really uncomfortable position to be in where you've already, like, committed yourself to one company and then this other opportunity comes up.
There is no doubt that it is uncomfortable. And there is, I think, a appropriate way to approach it. It happens all the time. I think it's being transparent. It is still wanting to hopefully like keep a relationship with that company, but it does happen. And I remember being so nervous saying, like, I'm going to have to call this person. I had already told them I was joining, but I was very gracious about the opportunity. I remember like 2 years later that hiring manager reached out to me about something else. So I did not burn a bridge. And so I think what's the takeaway here? It happens.
Mm.
Be gracious about the opportunity, be transparent, but keep the door open. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really, interesting and great story that you share there because I feel like there can be fear from being like, "Oh my gosh, I already accepted," and it's so funny you say that because I had a friend that went through a very similar situation, and yeah, it's definitely can be uncomfortable, but like you said, as long as you do it in a way that's kind and yeah, you said gracious, and if their interview process, like, was long or whatever, like, different opportunities come up, so yeah, what a crazy way for you to kind of get your start.
It was crazy. And I look back and it was probably good that I had a blind confidence. I remember making a pro con list of which job to choose.
Oh.
Me and my type A personality and looking at it on paper and saying, well, I can't take this startup role. Like, what am I thinking? So, yes, I took a chance and it did pan out. But at the same time, if it hadn't, there's always other opportunities out
Mhm.
there. And I think I had to remind myself of that.
So what was it like for you being the first big marketing hire? Because I also know sometimes I've heard experiences of like it's difficult when you're the only marketing person because you maybe don't have as many resources or as people to help you. So what was that experience like for you?
So it means wearing a different hat every single day, but also building out your external team. I brought on incredible agencies. We actually brought on a consultant that was like more at the CMO level that I learned so much from and that really served as a mentor. So he was not full time and wasn't even necessarily committed to a certain number of hours each week, but I could call him and ask questions and really leverage his expertise in the space. But I think my superpower in that role was that I asked so many questions to learn the industry. I spent time in market getting to know our retailers, our consumers. I would fly to New York and hang out with our sales team and do what they call route rides. You basically get in a car with the distributor and you go up and down the streets of New York selling in the product so I could understand how people were viewing the brand. And I eventually brought on great agencies. I led a brand refresh. We updated all packaging, communications, visuals, and messaging around the brand, which was all really exciting. But it definitely took time and effort and great partners that acted as an extension of the brand.
I think I know like different marketing girlies that maybe had that opportunity to be or maybe they didn't know they were gonna be the only marketing person on the team or they were the only marketing person on a team, and I know from what I've heard from them is it does feel really scary, and it does feel like, "Oh my gosh, like, how am I gonna do all this? Why did they trust me for all of this?" Do you have any advice for somebody who maybe is, like, that sole person on a marketing team or is maybe considering taking an opportunity like that on how they can navigate being kind of on their own?
Yes. Well, I would say in terms of taking the opportunity, especially if it's an early stage startup, look at the P&L, understand the business and understand your stakeholders. So at the time I was reporting into the founder, but we had investors. So like I wanted to interview with the investors because I knew I would be engaging with them. I wanted to understand the P&L, how much money's in the bank, what's the runway. That's all really important, and understanding the longevity of frankly like being in the role, and are you going to have marketing dollars and what does that look like? And then in terms of the position itself, ask for help. Bring in freelancers, talk to experts in the space, leverage your network and the founders network and the investors network to better understand the industry, to fill in maybe some of the gaps of the areas that you don't know. Cause there was a lot I did not know. And I had to figure it out really quickly, but it felt like a crash course in consumer packaged goods. And I just figured it out.
Yes. Okay. Incredible advice. I also want to ask you, how did you feel comfortable asking for looking at the P&L as a marketing girly? Like, was it something that you had to learn how to understand? Because most of us, when we think marketing, we're thinking more on the creative side, and like we're leaving the P&Ls to like the finance and accounting team. What was that process for you in your career to get comfortable to ask for that and to understand it?
I would say at that stage, I can't confidently say that I understood it, but I knew that if there was red, it was not a good thing.
The numbers are
Uh,
negative.
right. But what I did do is that I talked to friends in finance beforehand to say, like, what are some good questions that I should ask? And when we talk about runway, what does that mean? And just trying to understand the basics, right? And then if the business isn't profitable, like, what's their path to profitability? But I will say that as I, like continue to progress in my career, I became really good friends with finance. I wanted to understand a P&L, how to read it. I remember asking like my finance counterpart to quite literally like spell out what are these different, terms that you're looking at. What does that mean? And I'm going to take notes and learn it. I did like a P&L 101 crash course, and I actually made my marketing team go through it too, because I think it's really important to understand the full business as a marketer.
That is amazing. I absolutely love that. I also think in terms of even this podcast, especially women that I've talked to that are later in their career, they're even asking for that in the interview process, like before they're going to make a switch to another company. And it's probably one of your biggest assets. And it probably makes you so much more valuable to the company and to the team, that especially if you're working and reporting to the founder probably also really cares about the P&L, and knowing that as you're leading marketing, you are also understanding like those financial implications is just such an incredible thing to do, and maybe something that's not top of mind for you if you're in marketing and you're creative minded, but as I'm sure you figure it out, probably one of the biggest assets for you in your career.
It really is. And at least for me personally, I think I bring that balance of creativity and that analytical mindset.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what has, in addition to other things, has allowed me to grow in my career, because as you continue to progress in your marketing career, you may be reporting into a president, or you may be presenting in front of a board. And so understanding the larger business dynamics at play is so important, because at the end of the day, if you're managing a $10 million marketing budget, better make sure that those dollars are working for you,
Mm.
right? And how it's impacting the business. So building that skill, which I frankly did not learn in college, has certainly helped me in my career.
Absolutely. I always say this too with marketing. Did you study marketing in college?
I studied advertising. So I was
Okay.
technically in the communication school. So I majored in advertising and minored in Spanish. So I was never in the business school. So I had to get that skill set myself.
Do you speak Spanish?
I used to be fluent. I am not anymore. It's like probably one of my biggest regrets. So if you're listening and you're fluent in a second language, keep it up.
I was going to say, I know you mentioned you had a daughter. I was like, would you raise your daughter bilingual? I always wish that my mom did that.
100% yes.
Yes, 'cause I feel like it's so much easier to learn a language when you're young, and then it's so easy to lose it. I also studied Spanish in college, but it's not so great anymore.
Yeah, maybe one day I'll take lessons again. It
I
would be
always
so much
think about
fun.
that. I looked at them in Austin, and I was like, "I'm gonna take Spanish lessons," and then, yeah, life got busy.
I
Yeah.
get that.
But I also very similar. So I studied marketing in college and I did finance as well. And well, obviously, me starting I studied marketing Girly was really built on the fact that I felt like, well, I loved college and it was a great experience. You really don't learn the things that often are the most important or helpful in your career. And I feel like, especially with marketing, I love when I talk to girls that have, totally different backgrounds. I didn't even study marketing and how that helps them in their career because, yeah, there's stuff like learning how to read a P&L and that you might not be taught is important, but can be a huge asset for you. But sometimes you just have to learn those things on the job.
And there's always going to be learning on the job. Like,
Yeah.
if I'm not in a role where I'm learning and evolving, then I probably shouldn't be there. And the reality is that the marketing landscape changes so quickly. So, what was true a year ago or 2 years ago has changed. Like, I was on a call earlier and we're talking about, AI as it relates to SEO. A decade ago, it's like, okay, you're going to put in your keywords, and you have your whole content marketing strategy. And now we have to think about search engines, right? And AI and how that all comes together and like what role does that play in our content marketing strategy? So things change. And I think as marketers, we have to be curious. We have to be willing to learn. And I think that's really important to continue to grow in your career.
100%. Okay, so you have this switch in your career, you have this incredible opportunity at Chameleon Cold-Brew, and then you end up moving over to Nestlé. Can you tell me a little bit after your time at Chameleon Cold-Brew? I imagine so much happened and you helped contribute to a lot of growth. So what were like your biggest takeaways from that experience? And then tell me about that transition to Nestlé.
Absolutely. So, my time at Chameleon was magical in a lot of ways. It was a great team that came together, and no task was too big or too small. So, some days I was working on packaging and partnerships and social, and then our operations team would need help. And I'm literally in a Costco helping to stack boxes of our new cold brew box that launched at Costco. Like, it was just all hands on deck 24/7, but what it taught me was learning so many different pieces about the business. And I had my hands on a lot of different pieces of marketing. So it was a crash course in all things CPG. And when Chameleon was acquired by Nestle in 2017, I stayed on the Chameleon business for a few years and eventually transitioned over to Nestle. And that's how I ended up there, was actually through the Chameleon acquisition.
Interesting. Well, first, what was it like being at a company that got acquired?
It's crazy, and I think the experience is probably different for a lot of people. So, for Chameleon, we stayed largely independent of the Nestle organization for a few years. And so, what I mean by that is our core team stayed intact. We were able to make decisions around marketing kind of independent of Nestle. And then, as what happens with a lot of acquisitions, is eventually the team gets folded into Nestle and the Austin office closed, and some people left the organization and others transitioned over to the Nestle umbrella, which is what I did. So it's, I think, a different experience for everyone. I had a great experience at Nestle. It was like the cherry on top of me feeling like I'm getting almost a mini MBA experience. I never got my MBA. I always thought about getting my MBA. And after going through building the Chameleon brand and then ultimately spending time at Nestle, I felt like I had filled in some of those gaps from a skill set standpoint that I otherwise would have needed I would have maybe gotten an MBA to fill some of that in.
Because you went from that startup to, like, obviously
Big
Nestle is,
corporate.
like, massive. That's also interesting to hear because I know sometimes is getting an MBA the right decision for you in your career, so that's interesting to hear that you kind of got the on-the-job learning and felt that working at a big company was kind of comparable to maybe what you would have gotten by going through an MBA.
There was a lot of imposter syndrome. I was working with people that had their MBAs from really prestigious organizations. And then there was me that was at Nestle because I was at a brand that got acquired and then got put into another role. And so, transparently, I think there was a lot of doubt about me when I joined Nestle. I remember my manager at the time, who was great, said to me, people underestimate you. And it was hard to hear because I think as females in marketing, and a lot of times the only female in the room, people look at me and they say, well, you look young. And how many years experience do you have? And what's your age, right? And that unfortunately is a challenge, especially at large organizations. But I proved them wrong every time.
I love to hear it. That's also something that I feel like I've had experience in my career, and I hated being told that I was too young for something. Obviously, I mean, you earned your spot there because if you took a brand to acquisition, like you absolutely earned your spot in the room. I think that would say you'd already more than proven yourself at that point. But then getting to be put in these rooms with people that have these incredible degrees from incredible institutions and maybe looking at you and assuming that you're younger and you don't have this background and maybe you got here by attributing it to luck. Did you What was your perspective? Was it that you wanted to prove them wrong every day? Was it that you had imposter syndrome, but you just tried to ignore it? How did you kind of navigate it? Because I know for me it was something that I feel like I let bother me too much.
At first, I probably let it bother me too much, but then I came to the realization that I had a different perspective to offer. A lot of times at these big companies, there's almost a playbook of sorts, right? I mean, you're talking about organizations with billion-dollar brands. And I was coming into the organization having built a brand from the ground up in a really scrappy way, and how we thought about partnerships. We did an awesome collaboration at Chameleon with China beer. That wasn't going to happen at Nestle at the time, right? And so I think what I learned is that my superpower was also just bringing a fresh perspective of looking at brand building and marketing a different way. And I was able to bring that to the organization in a lot of ways too, kind of operated as this mini startup within Nestle. I was often tasked with launching new products, net new products within the organization and taking those to market and operating in a very entrepreneurial way that the organization maybe hadn't seen before.
I think that's the perfect perspective to have because if you have the perspective of oh my gosh, I don't have this degree or I don't have this background or then that's how you're going to show up but if you have that perspective of well this actually makes me unique and I'm actually going to this is a strength that I have not a weakness that I have, then I feel like that also allows you to step into your own confidence of yes no I absolutely have a place here, I deserve to be here and I've got something that's totally unique that no one else has. And so I love that mindset shift there. I think that's really important and I think hopefully inspiring for others to hear.
Yeah, I hope so. It's never easy to get there. And also realized being part of a bigger organization is that it allowed for professional development opportunities that frankly are harder to get at smaller organizations, at least in my experience. So I also raised my hand to be part of other projects, to get moved into new positions because I wanted to learn, for example, more about the e-commerce space. And so also take a look at the organization and say, if while I'm here, what are the things that I want to get from it? And for me, I was thinking about professional development opportunities, roles that I hadn't been in that would allow me to kind of round out my career and my experience.
Absolutely. Okay. So you go to Nestle, or I guess we're a little sidestep over to
Yes.
Nestle. And then you end up going to Last Crumb, which I don't know if anybody knows about Last Crumb, but super, super interesting company. Tell me about that because you went back to a startup. So tell me about this switch.
Talk about a 360. So I was at Nestle. It was the height of the pandemic. We were starting to come out of the pandemic. And I was wanting to be in a role that was more creative. And I was missing that magic that comes with being in a startup. And there was an individual who I actually worked with at Chameleon that called me. And she says, you are going to think that I'm crazy, but there is this brand that is selling a $140 box of cookies called Last Crumb. And I really want you to talk to the founder because the brand is doing something that no one else is doing right now. I was so skeptical.
It's a lot for a box of cookies.
Yes.
I've heard they're amazing though.
They are amazing.
Yeah.
And I get on with the CEO and I'm like, something's here. This is actually really interesting. And what was cool about Last Crumb is it really sits at the intersection of luxury and experience. So when you think about luxury brands and Last Crumb, even though being a food product really sits within that, it was all about experiences. And so from a marketing standpoint, as I was thinking about my next step, it was a direct to consumer brand, frankly, did not have direct to consumer experience. But what I knew that I could do was the storytelling piece, really understanding who our consumer is and bringing the brand to life in a way that hadn't been done before.
Okay, wow. Well, I also wanna know because I remember when I first heard about Last Crumb, I was like, "That's ridiculous. Like, that's crazy." How did you like, was it a gut feeling that you had that, like, this was the right decision for you? Because it is a bit of a, like, outlandish proposition, and again, like I said, actually, I have one of my friends, she's like, "I send it every year to, like, all of the agencies and, like, all my partners because like, the cookies are amazing," but it definitely is something that was entirely too new, I'm sure a big risk as well, so what was that process of being like, "No, actually, this is the risk that I wanna take?"
I tried the product and loved it. I met with the founders and the team in person and really understood the bigger vision. And it was kind of a marketer's dream in a lot of ways because how the brand was built was on experiential partnerships and social. When I was at Last Crumb, we did not spend a dollar on paid media,
Really?
which is somewhat unheard of for a lot of brands. But what we did do is we got Last Crumb in the hands of great people, especially on TikTok. This was kind of as TikTok was like, you could go viral on TikTok. We had amazing partnerships with the Beverly Hills Hotel. We did a really fun partnership with Fly by Jing, and we built the brand through social and through experiences and unexpected partnerships. And so, from a marketing standpoint, it was so fun because we could think outside the box, do things that, frankly, at a large organization are a lot harder to do.
Is there one example or story that comes to mind as, like, one of your favorites while you were there?
Yes. So, we had what we called a platinum box, $175 for 12 cookies. They were
Ins
pretty amazing cookies. And it was supposed to launch in Q4 around the holidays. And at the time, we maxed out our production on our core collection and realized that we could not introduce a new collection because we quite literally didn't have the capacity to be able to produce it. And so we ended up launching this platinum collection in January. And as a marketer, I'm terrified because in January, consumers are wanting to eat healthy. The kind of holiday indulgences are over. And so I'm thinking to myself, what do we do? I have to sell, all these boxes of cookies and the holidays have just ended. And, anyways, so we did a PR stunt and I hired a Rolls Royce and a model and we delivered this platinum box to different influencers and celebrities would show up in their driveway in the Rolls with the Rolls Royce, obviously great photo and content opportunity. And the box sold out on the first day.
Oh my goodness. No. And because I'm thinking January is definitely like, we've already spent all our money on the holidays. I'm probably on a diet. I'm probably going back to the gym. But you're able to sell out
We
a
and
$175 box of cookies.
and we thought it would take us at least a month to sell this out. So it was a lesson in creativity. We certainly created hype around it and interest and got people talking about it where people are like, I have to try this box of cookies. The flavors, yes, were indulgent and fun, but the box was also shareable and a great way to bring friends together or as a hostess gift, right? And so it was just such a fun way to launch a new product at a time where I kind of felt like all odds were against us and still be able to make it successful.
That's incredible. What, because I'm thinking of a campaign like that and even thinking of brands in my head that will sometimes do stunts. Obviously, like, I feel like you can a Rolls Royce, like a nice car and a model, I can definitely see the connection there, but was there something that you guys maybe thought of or did differently to make sure that the influencers were sharing it to make sure that it was a viral moment? Because 'Cause I'm sure it was more than just like, "Oh, let's get a car and a model."
Absolutely. I mean, it was about like again, luxury and experience. And so we wanted to partner with people that were excited about the brand. And we wanted to bring together a group that almost like we kind of positioned the box as almost like an omakase, which is, it's
Mm,
shareable. You take little bites. If there's a beautiful magazine and booklet that talks about the craft behind it. So there was a much larger storyline around this. And it created this unexpected moment at a time where most brands are talking about new year, new you, healthy eating, right?
yeah,
So
so
it
you're
was
doing something
also
different.
unexpected.
Yeah, okay, okay, well, how fun. So, you're getting to basically go back to that creative engine, go back to that startup mentality of, like, how can we make a big splash without doing a big paid ad campaign, for example?
Exactly. And it's a direct to consumer brand. And so for me, I learned so much about retention and how are we thinking about the marketing funnel and email and SMS and what platforms do we have from a non-paid standpoint to acquire new consumers. And so it was a different world and it was so much fun to work on, but I missed traditional CPG and being on a brand that had more of an omni-channel presence. And what I mean by that is not just online, but also at retail. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to join Skinny Dipped.
Okay, perfect. Well, this brings us to where you currently are now. So I know you gave us like a quick overview of your role at Skinny Dipped, but tell me a little bit more about maybe like a week in the life or a little bit maybe more insight into what your role entails.
Absolutely. Every week is different. So the Skinny Dipped brand has surpassed $100 million in revenue, which we're really proud of.
Oh my goodness.
And if you can believe it, we are, I think, a 34-person team.
Wow.
So, and I'm not saying marketing, I'm saying total organization.
Oh my goodness, only 34 people?
Yes. So
How big is your marketing team also quite
it's a
small?
pretty small marketing team too.
Okay. Oh
And
my
so
goodness.
when I say it's a small but mighty team, like I mean it, and everyone is so passionate about the brand. So it's a female founded brand, mom, daughter, and her two best friends that are all still part of the
Um,
organization. And we have a really clear kind of path and mission that we're working towards. So from a day in a life standpoint, and truly every day is different. But most of my time, what am I thinking about? I'm thinking about our campaigns and how we're going to bring the brand to life from a consumer standpoint. So, how are we showing up from a top of funnel standpoint through media and influencer and events and activations to how is the brand showing up on the digital shelf as well as in store? And my team is managing every single piece of that. And so a lot of my day is spent, kind of pulling these pieces together, right? And making sure that we have a really strong, consistent brand story and campaign. And then I also spend a lot of my time on innovation. So, what new products are we going to bring to market? And I call it front end innovation because it's really understanding the consumer and what's like our right to win and how does it tie back right to the brand and bringing these ideas in partnership with our founders to our R&D team that ultimately is commercializing it.
that is something new that I actually learned about. Maybe this applies more to CPG space more than just the CPG space, but that in marketing, you actually can have an impact on the new products that come out. That wasn't something I really thought of, right? I would always think like, okay, you're in marketing, you're marketing the products. You're not the one that's coming up with them. So what is there anything there you can share about what goes into figuring out? Or maybe obviously I'm sure it's not your decision alone. And like you said, there's R&D, there's other players that are in there, but as the marketer, what is your perspective or how do you kind of go about finding those new opportunities or like potential new products to innovate?
First and foremost, listening to our consumer. People comment all the time on flavors that they want to see. Always really fun is to kind of stalk our DMs and look at comments and see what people are saying. But more broadly, as we think about new categories, like what do our consumers love about the Skinny Dip brand? In a lot of ways, we take really nostalgic classics like a Reese's, for example, and we do the better for you version. Our dark chocolate peanut butter cups are amazing. And are there other kind of categories where we can do the same thing. And obviously, without saying too much, like at the end of the day, it all has to come together as a brand. What are we known for? We're known for lower sugar, better for you, really delicious, thinly dipped snacks, thinly dipped in chocolate or yogurt. And so we have to have that common through line when we launch new products, but there's a lot in the works.
Excited. Okay. Yeah, I think it's interesting too. I'm also wondering from your perspective because sometimes I think with social media, we can see things trend online, right? Maybe I'm trying to think of something. Well, I know you guys have lemon and lemon's here to stay, but I'm feeling like this summer, for example, lemon had like a big comeback. I feel like, Rhode had their lemon teeny, and I feel like
Yes.
yellow was the color. Everyone was wearing butter yellow. But how do you, as a brand, with Skinny Dipped or any brand, honestly, think about how like maybe trying to create something off of a trend, but also something that's gonna last past, like, a season, right? Like, a flavor or a color might be really popular right now and people really want it, but it might just be, like, a little fad, and in a couple months later, they're not really gonna want it, and now you maybe got this product that you created that's not lasting. Do you when you're thinking about new products, is it thinking about what's gonna be really big in this moment because this is trending, or is it more like what's gonna be big now, but also thinking long term?
100% longevity is, I think, the priority. I could come up with so many examples of flavors that are trend forward that we could launch today that probably wouldn't be relevant in 6 months. And so I think as marketers, there is a time and a place for it. Let me say that. But I think we have to evaluate one, first and foremost, what does your brand stand for? Like you should have that so crystal clear, and everyone on your team, regardless of the role, whether they're in marketing and operations, should understand what the brand stands for. And if that trendy flavor or trendy item doesn't fit within the brand, then I don't think it's worth exploring.
Yeah, that's like your North Star.
It's your North Star. And
Mhm.
then beyond that, maybe there is a time for a trendy drop and maybe you do it as a small batch. And then it's like, what's your goal? Is your goal that you want to do a social campaign out of it? Is your goal that it's going to be PR and buzzworthy? And maybe that's enough. I think that's really important to establish because at the end of the day, especially with a small team, it also comes down to resources. So, would I rather have my team spending time on something that's maybe popular for the next 2 to 3 weeks or something that's really going to make a lasting impact on the brand?
Yeah. Interesting to hear because I mean, I'm sure I feel like the fun part working in the CPG space would be, like, the new flavors and the new products and figuring out how to market that, tasting them and eating them a lot,
So
I'm
fun.
sure. But I'm curious, we've kind of gone through your career from, you know, fried chicken to startup to established corporate, back to startup, now to family-owned. You've kind of gone through so many spaces. When you're looking back on your career, I'm sure maybe there's not something that you would want to change, but is there something that or maybe actually let me reframe the question. Now in your career, now that you've had all that experience, what really motivates you? Because I feel like now you've really gotten to like try all these different things and you've gotten to be you followed your curiosity. So now what is the kind of the thing that you feel like motivates you most in your marketing career?
Think what motivates me the most is working for brands that I'm proud that I'm excited about where I feel like we're making a difference. So at Skinny Dipped, we are putting really delicious, better for you snacks and treats on the shelves at retailers. And we also have a give back component. We work with the Whitaker Peace and Development Initiative to empower and fund entrepreneurs in South Sudan, specifically female entrepreneurs, which is
It's
really
incredible.
cool. I get excited about working with brands that are making a difference, that are willing to step outside of the box and test and learn and move quickly. And honestly, sometimes fail and we pick ourselves up and we move on. Like, I always want to be with a team that's energized and excited about the brand because at the end of the day, we spend a lot of time together and we're all in it together.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that even ties back to what we talked about in the beginning of your career when you kind of made that pivot of really wanting to be aligned with your own values and just how important that is in your career to have that motivation. And if you were to kind of look back and give your younger self or give a younger marketing girly advice, knowing what you know now, what would you share?
So I think first and foremost, be a sponge, learn as much as possible. Don't be afraid to ask questions because as a marketing leader, I want my team to ask questions. I want my team to be curious. And then I would say something that's really helped me in my career is relationships. And it's not just marketing relationships or networking, it's relationships across the organization. And I think one of my superpowers is being able to work collaboratively as a marketer, partner with our operations team, partner with our finance team. And I think it's really important to establish that to continue to grow in your career. And you never know where someone's going to land. Like the number of times that someone on a totally different team has called me about a job, which always surprises me, like always like very honored, is it's just something that I never would have expected. So value those relationships. I think it matters.
I think that's incredible advice. And then now, how about looking forward? What are things that you're keeping your eye on, like trend wise? It can be either like marketing or career. What are you really curious about now?
Well, I mean, the obvious answer is everyone's talking about I have
Absolutely.
admittedly like mixed feelings about it because I think working for a brand that's so rooted in transparency, I think it's really important that we continue that. And
Mhm.
so, not having AI write emails or respond to customer service notes or AI generated images in our marketing materials, like having that transparency is so important. But where I think that it can help us is, you know, it can help us in other ways too, right?
Yeah.
Proofing. And as we think about SEO, and there's other kind of examples of that,
Hmm.
that's really interesting. And then I always think about too, how do we continue to grow our community? We talk a lot about our skinny dippers, our fans, and
Skinny dippers.
how
Cute.
how we bring together that group of people, you know, in real life, online, and how to continue to foster that because that our North Star too is right, continuing to build this community around the brand. And I always think about how can we do a better job doing that.
My prediction is that both of those things go so hand in hand because I think that the bigger AI gets, the more people are going to crave community and the more things that go online and become digital, I think the more important community becomes. I feel like as both of those grow, I think they're going to grow together.
I think that is spot on. And as a brand, we've started to do more experiential, showing up in markets. Like that's not going to stop. And I get really excited about it.
Yeah, me too. Okay, well, thank you so much for such an incredible episode. I honestly, hearing your story, you have truly inspired me, and just hearing you kind of share both of that finance side and that marketing side, and just like following your curiosity throughout your entire career. I am just so excited for the marketing girlies to get to listen to your episode and to your advice. Thank you so much for coming on today, Rachel.
Well, thank you. It's been so much fun.